Hi, welcome to episode 316 of the Corner of Knit and Tea. My name is Laura. I'm also known as Fluffyk on Ravelry, Fluffy Kira on Instagram and Twitter. I blog over at thecornerofknitandtea.com, which is where this episode and every episode show notes will be. I have an Etsy shop called The Corner of Knit and Tea, where I sell my handspun yarns and patterns. Hi, how are you? It is Monday, February 15th, and I am coming to you from a snowy and cold Kansas. I do apologize that I skipped last week. I have been struggling a little bit. So everything is fine. Everyone is healthy. I think I have just hit a bit of a pandemic wall or a mental hurdle. And so things have been a bit slow over here, and I'll talk a little bit about that as I get through more of my projects. So I'm coming to you from the southern edge of the Kansas City metro area. I do live on the Kansas side, and we are currently in our close to full second week of temperatures below freezing. It has been in single digits or below zero for the last 2 weeks, and it is cold. So, and actually, the news that we got today is that after 2 weeks of these super cold temperatures, we have exhausted our power reserves, and we are now potentially going to be having rolling blackouts. So I will tell you that it won't affect the filming of the podcast, since I'm doing that on camera battery, but it will affect potentially when I can upload the podcast. We'll have to see if I have power this evening. So that is a bit of a thing. It has snowed on and off over the weekend, and it has been snowing a chunk of the day today. So the streets are covered, businesses are closed, schools are closed. It is just really, really cold. And for those of you who don't live here or don't know much about the middle of the United States, at least in our area, this level of cold is actually, well, it's record-breaking, and it doesn't happen that often. Every few years, we have a winter where we have about a week at really cold temperatures. We are lucky in that most of our pipes are in the central utility area of the house, which is built inside. We do have a couple pipes that run along the edge of the house to get to the master bathroom, so I have to keep those running when we get down into single digits, or else our pipes will freeze. We have not really had rolling blackouts before. I will say that if they are true to their word, they're saying they're going to do 45 minutes to an hour of rolling blackouts. If that is the case, we will be fine. We have plenty of food. We have water and beverages. We do have a fireplace, and we have plenty of warm clothing, most of which we will not need if the power just goes out for an hour. If it goes out for longer, things are a little dicier, but if it goes out just for an hour, even though the house might get chilly, it will not be in freezing temperatures. So my thoughts go out to anyone who is not in a warm, safe, dry spot and who is facing this weather. We are having kind of a storm all over the U.S., so the southern United States is covered in ice and snow today, and they don't get any of that. And the Northeast is blanketed in lots and lots and lots of snow, and they're getting this storm later this week, so they'll be getting more snow. So that's kind of what's been going on a weather front. On a just chit-chat front, like I said, things are fine. Work is going along fine. Everything is fine. I know it sounds like I'm using the F word a lot. We're healthy. We are able to chat with our families. My parents got the vaccine this past week, so their first dose of the vaccine, they are 75 and 72, and my mom is a type 1 diabetic. So I am pleased that they are on their way to doing that. There is nothing really wrong other than that for the last couple weeks I have just felt unmotivated. I finished January with a bang and went to start February, and part of it is that I didn't have lots of specific things lined up for February yet, and part of it is that I just have a ton of stash, and I've started and ripped, and I just don't know what to knit, and I can't find a project to settle into. And so all of this, and I feel a little bit the same way at work. I get done the daily tasks, but some of the larger projects, I just can't settle into them, and I just feel, I don't know. It's just been a long time. So, part of me wanted to record last week just to show that it's not always sunshine and roses over here. And then part of me didn't want to record because I had almost nothing to show you. I don't have a ton to show you this week. I have lots of little things that I have sort of been procrastinating, I don't know whating at. So I will talk about them some. And I have been working a little bit at my February Finish It or Frog It plan, and I will talk to you a little bit about that too. So, today's tea is called Bad News. It is a Critical Role fandom tea from Adagio. My husband got me these fandom teas several years ago, and I'm still working my way through them. This was a fandom blend created by a fan, and it is a blend of masala chai, gunpowder green, and tiger eye. I'll tell you, the only thing I can really taste in this is the masala. It is super spicy, and I absolutely love it. And like I said, this was Bad News. It is, the fandom is Critical Role. It was their previous iteration of characters, not the one that they're currently working on. And Bad News was the gun that the gunslinger carried with him. So that is what this is named for. And I'm drinking it today in my roastery enamel mug and just keeping warm. I actually had a cup of this last night and was like, oh, that's delicious. I have to have more tomorrow. And I may even have to go back and order some because their chai is just really delightful. So let's talk about the things that I have finished. For several days, really, I could not knit anything. There was nothing I wanted to knit, there was nothing I wanted to do, and so I knit hats. And I think I was working on this one when I saw you last. Again, these are hats that I'm knitting for charity. They will be sent probably later this year unless I get the word that they need more. I mean, temperatures are freezing right now, but I believe the yarn store that I'm working with has already made their donations for this year. So this one was some leftover green sirdar, and then the part of the leftovers of the skein of Zombie from the Lorna's Laces. That's what I knit Miles' Valentine's Day socks in. And so I knit this one. I think I was partially part of the way through this one when we last talked, and then I had more of the skein, and I had been going to go with a red, but I ended up going with a burgundy. This is a Cascade Heritage, just something I had in the stash, wanted to get out of the stash, so again, another hat. This one was my standard, I think 80 stitches on size US 6 and 8, 6 for the brim, 8 for the body, and again, I'm holding fingering doubled for these, sort of more or less using the Barley hat as a guide in terms of casting on, although at this point I've basically sort of made my own pattern looking at their stitches. And this one I think had 88 because I really wanted to use up the yarn, and I think I have just a little bit more of the Zombie, but not enough to do another hat. And then I finished off the other cake of Lorna's Laces that I had been going through. It was the white with the little bits of the little speckles in it. And so I have another red one, and then I have kind of a baby blue one. I had this pale blue, and then I put it together with the, and I'm seeing the glare of the camera, but it's just a real pale blue, and the speckles. So that's another 4 hats done and ready to go. They're super easy. Basically, it's the 2x2 rib, and then just knit in the round for 6 inches or so, and then do the decreases and the pom-pom. I can do usually 1 a night or 1 every other night, depending on how much I want to knit. And like I said, they're just like, I don't even have to think about them, and so they were a good way to sort of get through my slump. So then I talked about finishing and frogging things, and last episode I pulled out that blue sweater, and it was called Pismo Beach Pullover by Amanda Schusinger, who is Handmade Knits, and I was knitting it out of some Katia Air Luxe, and I looked at it and thought that I had some mistakes in it, and decided that I would keep going. And I knit a few more rounds, and then I looked at what I was doing, and I realized that there actually were quite a few mistakes in it. Somehow when I had joined to work in the round, I hadn't placed my pattern repeats correctly, so at least on the front of the garment, the pattern repeat was actually offset, so it wasn't quite centered. And then I went and looked, and I guess based on my gauge swatch, I had decided to do a different size. I had like done pattern math and decided to do a totally different size in the pattern. And then when I held it up to myself and tried it on, because it was a bottom up, so it didn't seem like it was going to be big enough. And so I decided that I would go ahead and rip it, and I started to try and rip it, and the yarn was it was a wool and viscose blend, but it was kind of fuzzy. And as I started to rip it, it didn't want to rip because it was sticky, and then the yarn broke a bunch of times. And at that point, I decided, I think this one's done. So, I do not have enough yarn left because I could not rip it out of the body. I threw away that piece, and I have just under 1,000 yards left of that yarn, and I will find something else to do with it. But for now, the remainder has been returned to stash, and the project has been frogged. So I reclaimed the needles and stitch markers, and that one is off the list and done. So then, I was still feeling, that left me feeling kind of frustrated, because I was like, well, I wanted to work on that. I was kind of motivated to work on that. What am I going to work on? And I sort of sat and stewed. And then I decided that I was going to clean up my craft area out by I have a million craft areas. Let's just talk about that. So I have obviously my craft room, which is my office. It's not terribly clean. You see only one small part of it that I keep kind of clean for the podcast. But I also have an area out by the couch where I have all my current projects next to me. I have my needles out there, and then I just have kind of a basket that's a catch-all. And so I decided to go through and figure out what was out there. One of my other frustrations is that I am not great about putting my needles back into my needle storage system. And so half the time when I go to find a needle that I know I have, because I can usually find the package, that's still in the needle storage system, but the needle itself is not there. So I decided to clean out all the project bags that were out there. And I actually found another project that needed finishing, and it really needed a very minimal amount of finishing. And so that is these socks, and you will probably not remember too much about these socks because I actually did not knit the full socks, so you have not heard me talk about them very much. These socks were actually a gift from a friend for my birthday. And what they were is she got a sock knitting machine, and so she cranked a tube and sent me these socks. And I do not remember what the yarn is. I know there was a label in there, and ultimately they were Christmassy socks because I thought they looked either springy or Christmassy. And she actually put in a skein of Lang Yawool in the red. And so immediately what I did is I separated the tubes and I knit the cuffs and the toes in both of them. So I had two matching socks. And then I was supposed to, well, and I don't want to say this lest I be judged, but here we go. My birthday is in May. So these are from May of last year. And in May or June, I believe, I put in the heels and toes and then talked about how all I needed to do was, I put in the cuffs and the toes. And then I talked about how all I needed to do was clip the do a true afterthought heel, which was clip in the tube where I needed to and then put in my heel. And basically knitting an afterthought heel looks very much like knitting another toe. And so to do a true afterthought heel, you clip in the middle of one of the rows and you pull that one row of stitches out to the sides, and then you pick up and you knit around. And actually what I did is I picked up one row of stitches on my DPN, half the sock, and then I skipped a row and picked up the next row below it. So basically I had two rows on DPNs and one in the middle that where I was going to cut, and then I cut right in the middle of the sock and unraveled to the outer edges. Those ends I wove inside the heel once I did the heel, and then what I did is I knit an afterthought heel. The way I knit my afterthought heel was I probably did about 4 rounds of just plain stockinette with no decreases, and then I started my decreases every other round like I do for my toe. And let me grab my maybe if I can. Oof, hang on just a second. Sorry for the clanging, all the hangers are right there together. So basically what I did is I did that for both socks. It took me one evening. Yes, I procrastinated for a whole year and it took me one evening to finish these socks. And so here are my tube socks. And again, I did not, they're a little bit on the big side. I think I might have placed, I didn't know exactly where to place the heel, but they'll be comfortable enough around the house. So I finished my socks. And like I said, the heel took me almost no time at all. I did both of them in one evening, which was 3 or 4 hours of picking up and knitting, but really it was not very onerous. And these had been sitting forever, and so I got to take these out of the bag and call them finished. And again, I did not knit the tubes. The tubes came to be cranked, so it's minimal knitting on my part, but in terms of the fix it, finish it, or frog it, I definitely finished it. So I'm counting that as a February finish, and then I took all the needles and everything out of that bag and put the project bag away, and it's one less project that is waiting in the wings to be finished. So those are some fun socks, and yeah, my finished those. So, in the middle of all this, probably not this weekend, but last weekend, we went out to pick up takeout, and we went to go get in the car, and of course, I always have some knitting with me in the car. And Wes looked at me and said, "Where's your knitting?" And I said, "I don't have anything." And he said, "What do you mean you don't have anything?" And I said, "Well, I don't really have anything on the needles right now. I'm not feeling it." And he said, "Go get a sock." And I had no socks on the needles because I had already finished those. So I went ahead and got a sock project. So I have started and finished a sock. It is a shorty, but I have done it. Let me pull the other. So I took the rest of the Spring Blooms yarn that I used to knit Roxy her Valentine's Day socks, and I knit myself a shorty sock. So this is Knitpicks Felici in the Spring Blooms colorway, basically a standard sock. All I did was I did about 10 rows of knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, and then I did just a couple stockinette rows, and then went almost immediately into the heel all the way through to the foot and my rounded toe, and it fits lovely. And I am going to be able to get to both socks, I hope, out of one ball of Knitpicks Felici, which is 50 grams and I believe 210 or 20. Hang on, that's not it. It's the other one. So it's Knitpicks Felici, and this is in the Spring Blooms colorway. And the yarn here is 218 yards to 15 grams. So about 220 yards, I should be able to get my other sock. I also have a little tiny ball of left over from the socks that I did for Roxy. So if I have to break into this to finish it, basically I have decided I'm going to try and do the same striping. And then if I really have trouble, I will make it differ at the toe because the toe will always be in my shoe. Of course, these won't really, you know, I might just start wherever I'm at because I don't know that they need to match. Anyway, so that is the one thing that I have, well, okay, I guess I knit the hats, but this is the one thing that I have truly knit while I haven't been speaking to you. And I haven't even started the second sock yet. I need to, hopefully I will get that on the needles this week. But this got me through kind of another bit of, I don't feel like it. So that's what's going there. So in the last couple days, I have actually cast on 2 new projects. And still I am not, well, okay, there's one other that's been on and off the needle since then, and then I'll talk about the new one. So once I finished the blue sweater, I went back to another bag that had a sweater just barely started in it. And it was a really beautiful blended fiber. It was a rambouillet that I had gotten from Abundant Earth Fibers, and I had gotten it from them about a year and a half ago, I think. And I had gotten just enough for a sweater. It's a DK weight. It's super soft, and the yarn is produced in small batches in their mill out on Whidbey Island, which is near, not too far from Seattle. So I had this sweater quantity of yarn, and I had decided that I wanted to combine it with some hand spun. And if you remember last year, I had a bit of a couple week obsession with baubles, and I knit a cowl that had it was like the plain background, which was the Abundant Earth Fibers yarn, and then I used something else at the time to make like a cowl with a lot of baubles on it. It had like a really interesting kind of pearl and bauble stitch. And I really liked that and decided I was going to try and translate that into a sweater with a little bit of my hand spun. But what ended up happening was I started it, I got, I did the collar, and then I got maybe this far into it, and I started to try and work the hand spun in, and it turned out the yarn was DK, and my hand spun was really more of a fingering, and it didn't really work, and I put it back in the bag and kind of fell out of love with it and forgot about it. So that is the next thing that I pulled out after I ripped the blue sweater and returned that to stash. So I ripped out what I had done, and I went looking, and there is a new pattern that has just been released from Elizabeth Doherty. And let me pull that out so I can show you, because it's really lovely. I downloaded a bunch of photos, and this was the one photo that I forgot to... Oh, did I? No, I didn't. I forgot to download this photo so that I could show you what it looks like. It is a colorwork sweater, and the interesting thing is that the colorwork is actually slip stitched. So that was one of the things that I liked, and it's in a lot of slip stitch patterns that I haven't necessarily seen before. A lot of times slipped stitch looks very mosaic, and this one looks a little less mosaic. It's done some interesting things, and I actually knit a little bit of it before I had to rip it out. You might understand why I'm getting a little frustrated, because really it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Other than the socks and the hats, so far I have knit nothing that like looks right, fits, like... So basically, and a chunk of this was my own fault, because basically what I did is I measured the gauge on the sweater before I ripped it out, and when I ripped it out, I sort of applied that to the next sweater and dropped a needle size or 2 to try and accommodate, and it didn't quite work. So let me show you the photo of the sweater. It is called Cyan, S-I-A-N, and it is by Elizabeth Doherty, and it looks like this. So it is a 2-color, and it's got really interesting slip stitch motif work. I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but it's just got some really interesting looks, and it's got things that are leaning and just really interesting looking slip stitch that I had never really seen before. And so I picked out the yarn, I used the Abundant Earth fibers, I picked out some hand spun, and I started to work on it, and really I was not getting gauge, and it was going to come out huge, and so I ripped it, and I went back and did some gauge swatches, and to be honest, I don't know that I'm going to get gauge with the yarns I want to use, and so this has now been put kind of on the back burner. I'm really dying to use that Abundant Earth fiber yarn, and I really want to use it with some of my hand spun, and one of the other reasons that I ripped was because I was using a skein of hand spun, and I didn't feel like there was enough contrast between the hand spun and the Abundant Earth fibers, and so I didn't feel like all that slip stitch work was showing up nicely. I really like how it shows up against the gray there, and so I really need to find something bright that will show up against mine. Now mine is more of a natural color. It's kind of a salt and pepper color for the main color, so what I needed was something really bright, and I did find something bright. I found something that I spun a while ago, so it's a bit thicker, but it's just not working. So I ripped this one out, and to be honest, this one of all the things did not faze me as much as the others did, but it was just, like another project that I couldn't make work. So I moved on to 2 projects where I decided gauge is not really very important, because right now gauge seems to be my mortal enemy. So let's talk about them. The first thing that I decided that I needed, and I decided this a little while ago, is I decided that I need a sleep hat. I am one of those people who gets super cold and who likes to tuck my head under the blankets every night. And so every night I come to bed and I slide down and I pull the sheets and blankets up over my head because my ears are cold and my head is cold. And it drives my husband crazy because he likes to fold the sheet down over the blankets and have it nice and just like... And he is a heater, so he is always warm, and so he just really hates it when I do that. And so my thought was, if I knit myself a nice hat, I could probably make it work. And I have been trying to support designers who are making a go of it off Ravelry, and so one of the designers that I decided that I wanted to support this year was Woolly Wormhead. And so I decided she does beautiful, beautiful hats. And so I decided I was going to find a yarn and a hat and make a go of it. And one of the hats that I really love, and I saw someone knit it recently, this is called the Out of Darkness hat. And it's by Woolly Wormhead. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's got kind of a thick brim. And then it's a beanie hat that has kind of a little bit of a chevron pattern in it. And it actually is available as a beanie or as a tam. And I sort of actually like the way the tam looks even better, but I was thinking if I'm making it for my head to sleep in, it needs to be a beanie, although I am going to make it longer than the pattern suggests because I'm going to just add more length to the body because I want it to come down over my ears. So that is what the pattern, Out of Darkness by Woolly Wormhead. And I went looking in the stash for some yarn, and I wanted something really, really, really super soft. And I found this, which I had bought in Arizona when I went through. I bought it at Tempe Yarn and Fiber, and it was a local dye, and it's called Dylicious Yarn, and it's the Coco Nino base, and they are a dyer out of Arizona. And it is a 80-10-10 superwash merino cashmere nylon. It is lovely. It's 450 yards. So it is just a really, really lovely skein, and it is kind of in a periwinkle colorway, but then it has streaks of other things. It's sort of a semi-solid, but with some speckles. I don't know how much you can see. So it's a blue yarn. It's got some yellow. It's got some darker blue parts. It's got some gray or purple, and it's really, really pretty, but most of all, it's super soft, and I thought that would be really, really nice. So the pattern is knit on, I want to say it calls to be knit on US 1 2.25 needles. And so I started it on DPNs, but quickly got frustrated with that. And now I think I'm actually on size 1.5, which are 2.5 millimeter, because I had a needle, but the needle is kind of long and it's not working quite as well as I want. So basically I have completed the brim, and now I need to figure out what I'm going to do for a needle to work this. I've left it on this needle, but basically it calls for a double thick brim, and so that is at a pretty tight gauge of about 7 stitches per inch. And so I just have my nice soft brim down there, and like I said, I am going to add length as I go. So yeah, that's what I've got. I hope I'll work on this week. I hope within the next week or two. On this side you can sort of see some of the yellow. It's not really coming across as yellow in the on the camera, but like that splotch right there is actually fairly yellow in my light. I don't think it shows up. It looks more white or gray in your light, but here it looks very yellow. Anyway, so that is what I've got so far, which is not very much. I basically did all of that in a day or a day and a half, and I checked and it fits. It's a good fit because it's not going to be quite as stretchy because it's not it is just stockinette stitch. It's not ribbed, and I don't know whether I would have liked it ribbed, but I'm following the pattern, and I am just about ready to start kind of the chevron kind of jagged bits, and so I'm looking forward to that. So that is one thing that I'll be working on this week, and hopefully finishing that in the next week or so. The second thing that I decided I wanted to knit was I had a kit that I bought from my local yarn shop, which is Yarn Social, and I had bought it back probably in the fall. And I just try and keep buying things from my local yarn store because I want to support them. And the pattern is called the Nova Cowl, and it is by Karina Spencer, and it is just kind of a fun slipped stitch cowl. It's got kind of a tassel and I-cord to kind of cinch it in at the top, and it's just kind of an easy, it looked like a pretty easy knit. It's just mosaic slip stitch, so not even color work. You're still working with only one color per row. And the nice thing about a cowl is that it's not big enough that if you're getting it's a cowl, so if you're not getting exactly the gauge you want, it'll just be a little bit bigger or smaller. And it's also not so large. When you're talking about a cowl that's only supposed to be 24 or 26 stitches in the round, even if you're off by a little bit, it'll just be a couple inches, as opposed to like when you're knitting a garment, if you are off by just a little bit, you can still be off by like 6 or 10 inches in your whole garment because it's so much space. So I decided that I was just going to give this a go. And the original kit came with, so I wanted the kit in the original colors, but they had actually run out of the original colors by the time I purchased mine. So I got a different kit. And then when I really opened the kit and looked at the color work, I decided that they were not exactly the colors that I wanted to use. So the yarn that I am using for this is yarn by Hudson and Westco. They are a relatively new small batch American wool fiber company. And I know that because around Thanksgiving of 2019, so almost a year and a half, well, not quite a year and a half ago, about a year and a quarter ago, it feels like forever ago, but towards the end of 2019, they actually contacted me. They were getting ready to release their first collection of patterns and asked me to do a little bit of tech editing work for them. And so I did, and they released the pattern collection, I want to say in December or January, along with their yarn. So they debuted like right at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. And I've been wanting to try their yarns for a while, and I just haven't bought. And now it turns out that my local yarn store is stocking them, and they decided, Karina Spencer put together this cowl pattern with these yarns as a kit, and I decided, wow, that's a really great way to support Karina Spencer, support who is a local Kansas City artist, support my yarn store, and get to try some new yarn. So the yarn is Weld. It is by Hudson and West Co. And like I said, it is a U.S. spun milled fiber. It is 70% U.S. merino, 30% U.S. Corriedale, 200 yards in a 50-gram skein. So it is fingering weight, and it comes in approximately 50-gram skeins. It reminds me a little bit of like Jameson's of Shetland in that sense, just that it's kind of that size. And so the four colors that I that were in the kit that I ordered, and I've used some of these already, which is why not all the balls are the same size, were these three, and this one. And so the colors are charcoal, this is red feather, this is jam, and this is ash, and I just haven't wound up the ash yet. And while I liked these colors, I realized that they're actually very similar in terms of color value. These two especially are not markedly different, and actually the intensity of the orange is not markedly different, and then you've just got the light here. So I was concerned that this was not going to produce what I wanted in terms of the cowl, and so I went and found something else that made it a little bit more true to the original, and this is some green that I had in the stash from a previous project and gave me more of a two lights, two darks. Now, I ended up starting the pattern kind of before I really thought through that I could find something else in my stash. And so I'm not sure that I've made the best color placement choices, but I decided that I was not ripping. This is just a cowl. I just want to knit this. I want to knit something through to completion, and I will wear it anyway because it is just a cowl and it's fun. So, as you can see from the picture, and this is sort of how I will, so the picture has kind of the light gray, which I actually have as the first color, and then the jam as the second color, and I really liked it in the middle section there, and then the, it had kind of a green as the third color, and then the fourth color is a natural color. So what I ended up doing is I ended up putting my, darkest color out at the edge for the ribbed edging, which is why there's little of this left, because I've already done half of the knitting, and this is of course the color that will get the most use. And then I put jam next to it, which I don't think is the best in color contrast. I will show you in a minute what I've got so far. And then I just started putting in the green in, which is really, 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 really bright, and then the center will be the ash. So this is the way my colors are going to go. If I'd thought about it, I probably should have done something like this, or something like this, so that there would be a little lighter or darker, but no matter how I get it, I wasn't really going to be able to get everything the way I wanted it to be, and so I just went with what I had, and yes. So this one I actually made a fair amount of progress on, and this is just yesterday's work, so actually I made quite a bit of progress on it. So as you can see, the bottom hem is actually a fold over because it is going to encase, you can see actually the two little holes here, it is going to encase the I cord, so technically this is the top. So I went ahead and knit the top, and then I went through part of the first color work chart and knit that charcoal with that jam. And my concern is basically that the charcoal and the jam, there isn't enough contrast in them, so it's hard to see. I mean, obviously in person you can see it, but of course for color work it's more interesting when there is more contrast. So my concern there was kind of well-founded. I know that these two colors are going to contrast just fine. Then there's going to be a section of these two colors, which I think might contrast okay. They are fairly similar in value, but because they're so different in color, I think that they actually might be okay. And then the center section will be these two together, and I think that will be enough of a difference that you'll be able to see. But in general, my cowl will not be as, oops, I'm losing stitches. In general, my cowl will not be as bright as the first one, and I wish I'd thought about that a little bit more when I bought my package or before I cast on, but at this point I really am not. It is what it is, and I'm going to keep going because I am really very done trying to figure things out and pull and start again. So this will definitely get a lot of work this week. I hope that I'm going to finish this week, because this is the one thing that I'm working on that I am sort of the most excited about. And like I said, it's a cowl. If it's not 100% the perfect colors, that's fine. I can always knit it again. If I don't want to wear it, I can donate it. But this is kind of a project that I'm hoping is going to break the kind of dry patch in knitting. And I will just save the kind of orangey color for another time, because it is a nice skein of wool. I did actually also think about other things that I have in the stash. I do have some leftovers of Jameson and Smith from when I did the Boosta beanie, so I was thinking about adding that in there, but I couldn't find those yesterday, and that's another part of my frustration. I am trying to kind of clean up and get a little bit organized. Part of that was cleaning out those project bags and trying to get my needles back where they are, and I'm just trying to really go through things, and I have let things slide for so long, just putting them back wherever and not paying attention, and I feel like I can never find anything when I need it and want it, and I wish I could put my hands on things, because that's also part of my frustration. So that is a little bit of what knitting with me has been like for the last couple weeks. It's been a lot of ups and downs. Not as much as I would like, but I'll just take the February doldrums. Part of the issue was also that I knew I had another sample coming, but we hadn't made any decisions on it yet. We have now made decisions, and I swatched this weekend, and we'll see. I haven't even looked to see what the swatches say. I'm not necessarily looking forward to that. But I will look and see what the swatches say, and then by next week I hopefully will have a new sample cast on for Zen Yarn Garden. So that is what it looks like from here. In the meantime, I also ordered yarn for the children's sweaters for this year. I know it's like February 15th, and I'm thinking about the children's sweaters. Their birthdays are in October, for those of you who have not been here before, but I'm already thinking about what I'm going to knit them. I think I'm going to knit them the little sock arm sweaters this year, and that is a pattern by Stephanie Lotvin, who is Tellybean Knits, and it is a really cute pattern where you use self-striping sock yarn for the sleeves, and then you use a solid or a semi-solid or a speckled or whatever you want for the body, and I am going to knit them both little sock arm sweaters, but of course completely different colorways. So they will sort of be matchy-matchy, but not really. Anyway, I think that's probably what I'll put on my needles next, because as I said, I'm struggling a bit with gauge and getting things going, and as much as I would really, really, really like to knit something for myself, that doesn't seem to be working right now, so I think I'll knit things for other people until I can get back to working on my own things. So that has been a very long podcast. However, I still have a little bit of spinning to show you. So let me show you that, and then I will say goodbye and let you get back to your knitting. And I hope that you have been having a more fruitful knitting time than I have. You know, it's interesting. Last year I was super productive and got tons of stuff done, and like I said, I think I just hit a wall a couple weeks ago, and I mean, I'm not beating myself up over it. I don't want you to think that that's where I'm at. I think any productivity level that anyone is at is great. It's just, it depresses me a little bit to not know what I want to do and to not have some knitting to do and to sit in front of the TV at night and just think, I don't want to knit that. I don't want to knit anything. I don't know what I want to knit. And like I said, I'm not trying to beat myself up over it. It's just that, like, knitting is something I always do, so when I hit a slump, it's really out of the ordinary, and in some ways it makes me feel worse because I can't even knit to make myself feel better. So let's talk about spins. I don't even remember where I was with spins. Okay, 2 weeks ago I showed you I forgot to bring the spin that I had finished. It is called Forest Fungi, and it is Polworth from Polworth, or is it Merino? I can't remember. I think it's Merino. It's from Apothecary Fibers, and I got it from my local yarn store, Yarn Social. They were having a sale, and so I stocked up on some fiber, and this one is a gorgeous blend of reds and pinks and browns and grays, and it looks exactly like mushrooms in the forest. Some of the bright red ones, and then also the morels that are kind of pinky, and then brown and gray, and it is just really lusciously soft and plump, and I'm thinking about maybe trying to order a sweater quantity for myself. I don't think the camera is doing it justice. This one is up in the shop right now, and I think it's in the high 300s. I want to say 363, 373 yards of, I would say probably a sport weight, because it's really, really fluffy and squishy, and I absolutely love it. And if someone doesn't buy it, I'm probably going to do something with it. So if you want it, you should think about heading over to the shop. And there are better pictures on my Instagram feed and in the shop. Next up, I spun a Mardi Gras braid by the Woolly Artisan. I think it was a local to me fiber company. I will put the link in the show notes. The show notes are on my blog, which is thecornerofknitandtea.com. It is a semi-local person. The braid was a gift from another friend, but it was a semi-local vendor, and the colorway was Mardi Gras, and it was bright, bright, bright. And I showed it to you and talked about it, and I decided to spin it I divided the braid in half, vertically, so I had two halves that were each the same in color repeats, and then I spun them straight through so that I could chain ply. I don't often spin that way. I like my yardage better when I do a 2-ply as opposed to a 3-ply. But I decided that the colors were such that I was afraid that they were going to get really, really muddy because it was a yellow, a purple, and a green, and I just really did not want them to get all muddy. So I chain plied, and I'm happy that I did. I am not the best at chain plying. This is not my best yarn. This one is actually not up in the shop. I don't know what I will do with it. If for some reason these are your absolute favorite colors and you want this, let me know. But otherwise, it's not a perfect skein. So I sort of hadn't planned on putting it in the shop. But I am really pleased with how it came out, in the sense that chain plying was definitely the right move. I will say that when I showed it to you, it had these crazy bright green sections and crazy gold sections and crazy purple sections, and there was quite a bit of white in the braids. And so you can see that a lot of the colors kind of softened. The purple did not end up, like in a few spots, it's really kind of intense, but then in a lot of spots, it's really more of a lavender because there's so much white in there. And the green kind of did the same thing. Like at sometimes it's really, really grassy green, but at sometimes it's actually very pale. The yellow is the only one that didn't have those sections, and so the yellow is just like bright screaming yellow throughout the skein. So this is kind of a fun one. Like I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with it. It might get turned into a stuffed animal at some point. I knit bunnies and some things in my hand spun. It's closer to a worsted. I got about 200 yards, and which I totally expected because I did not spin it super thin. The braid was a little bit compacted. I'm not sure how long it had sat, and like I said, the colors were such that it was just kind of a riotous color all over the place. But I am pretty happy with it, and like I said, I made the right choice, because otherwise I feel like we would just be looking at something that was crazy muddy, and I just don't think that that would have been the way to go with this braid. I don't know that anyone would have used it then, and at least now, I mean, it is Mardi Gras colors. It's obnoxiously Mardi Gras colors, but if I were to knit it, it would probably knit up in like some striping. So I think that could be cute, especially if I do like a bunny or something like I've done in the past. So then this week I spun one more. This is not washed and thwacked yet, but I did spin this week, and this one is more of an earth tones. This is Hello Yarn, and it is a South African wool blend. So it's not specific about which wools, but it was pretty soft. It's a little crunchy now, which it might be a little bit over applied, and I also want to wash it because it will probably soften up with some washing. This was in earth tones, so greens and browns, and it was aptly named Organic Matter, and this is what I ended up with. My guess is it will be 350 to 400 yards of a fingering-ish, sport-ish weight, and like I said, it's got some really nice teal and green bits. You can see it's a little curly because I haven't washed it yet, and then it's also got lots of browns and tans, and so it's a really nice skein. This would probably be good for socks. It is not super wash, but it would probably make really nice socks, and I'll have to see what it washes and dries to see if it would be good for, it might have some nice drape to it for like a shawl or something. Like I said, it's not next to the skin soft, but it's not super rustic, so I'd like to wash it and see what happens. But that was my final spin, and you guys didn't even see that as a braid because I started that this past and finished it this past week. So this one will go up in the shop, but I just need to wash it and measure it. And this one actually I spun slightly differently. So I have talked about before, this podcast is going to go on forever, but welcome. I skipped last week. You can have 2 this week. Normally when I spin my braids, I spin both halves onto one bobbin, and then I wind it up in a center pole cake, and then I apply from the inside and the outside of the ball. I have done this because for the most part I 2-ply, and I like to get every last little bit of the yardage. The thing is, when you ply from both ends of the cake, you end up wherever you end up, and you use up every single last little bit of yarn. When I first started spinning and I tried to divide braids, no matter how carefully I divided and weighed the halves of the braids to see if I could spin each half on a separate bobbin and then ply together, no matter how closely I weighed, I often spun at slightly different gauges through the braids. So I always had a bunch left over of one, and I would run out of one. So I always had these little bits and pieces of leftover ends on the bobbins, and it annoyed me because I was wasting fiber and I didn't know what else to do with the ends. Now, ultimately, what I ended up doing was creating just a bobbin full of ends, and then I plied them together with another bobbin full of ends, and I had kind of a crazy scrappy skein, and that was fun. I used that to knit some Christmas ornaments and some of those kinds of things. But this time I actually divided. Oh, okay. So I've been spinning and plying from a center pole ball for ages. A few weeks ago, I was in the Hello Yarn chatting forums, and Adrian actually posted a link to an article by Jillian Moreno, who is a spinning instructor and author of some renown. She wrote the book Yarnitecture most recently, which is a wonderful book. I would encourage you to read it. And she talked about kind of why you wouldn't want to apply from the inside and outside of a center pole ball. And part of that is because the twist at the center of the cake and the twist at the outside of the cake are different. And so you are applying with different amounts of twists in your singles. And that's really a bad way of explaining it. But if you are interested in the article, I can send you the link to the article. It was just kind of an interesting read. And it made me decide that I wanted to try, again, applying from 2 different bobbins. So for this spin, I actually divided the fiber in half, and then I spun half on each bobbin and plied them together, and I had less than 3 yards of singles left over at the end on one bobbin. So I am calling that a win. I used up all but 3 yards of the fiber, and that would have only yielded 1.5 more yards of yarn. So I'm not perturbed by that at all, and I'm really pleased with this spin. So that brings me to this week, and this week I'm going to spin something with some color because it is just too dark and gray out there. This week I am going to spin a braid from Fat Cat Knits. It's called a Flamingo, and it's a 33-33-26-8. Holy, holy, holy. It is merino bamboo. Merino bamboo, South American wool, and rayon neps, maybe? That's what it looks like. And it is this great braid from Fat Cat Knits. And actually, I got this colorway in 2 different fibers, and one is quite a bit brighter. The thing about bamboo is that it always gives the fiber a little bit of a frosted look. And so I really, really liked this. It was like bright pinks and blues and corals, and I was charmed by it, and at this time during the winter I would like some of this color, so I am going to spin this one this week. I didn't start last night because we didn't have knit night last night because it was Valentine's Day, but so I am going to work on spinning this one this week, and hopefully we'll have this done to share with you next week. Again, this is Fat Cat Fibers in Flamingo, and this will be for the shop, so if you're looking for a shot of some bright, I can hopefully help a little bit. So this was just kind of a fun one that I couldn't resist. So 50 minutes later, we are through the podcast. Like I said, I guess since I didn't podcast last week, I had lots to talk about this week. I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you have not, as I have, hit a wall. I hope that you're enjoying your crafting. I hope that I will be enjoying my crafting again soon too. Today I am wearing, I showed you the finished but not finished and blocked. I am wearing my finished Comfort Fade Cardi by Andrea Mowry, knit in Zen Yarn Garden. It is absolutely luscious. I finished blocking it this past week and wanted to wear it today, and it is perfect. It's a merino cashmere and nylon. No, it's superwash merino. Superwash merino, but it is absolutely luscious and really wonderful to wear on this kind of gross, overcast, really cold day. So I hope you're having a wonderful week wherever you are. May your crafting mojo be better than mine. And I will try not to skip a week again soon. So hopefully I'll see you next week. And I will say, as I always do, happy knitting, happy spinning, happy sipping, and I'll see you next time. Bye.